In reading a number of commentaries on Revelation chapter 14, there seems to be a great debate about the location of Mount Zion. In Revelation 14:1, John states, "Then I looked, and there before me was the Lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000 who had his name and his father's name written on their foreheads." Just to be clear, no one is debating the actual geographic location of the physical Mount Zion. Like, you can pull it up on Google Maps and see it for yourself. Now, the question is whether John is referring to an earthly Zion or something else. What might that something else be? Well, Hebrews chapter 12 speaks of Zion this way: "But you have come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem." It couldn't be more clear. The author of Hebrews is talking about a heavenly Zion. In Galatians, Paul says something similar. Now, Hagar stands for Mount Sinai in Arabia and corresponds to the present city of Jerusalem because she is in slavery with her children. But the Jerusalem that is above is free, and she is our mother. In other words, there's more than one way to understand Zion. Now, those who argue that the Zion of John's vision is of the heavenly sort argue that earlier, when the Lamb is referenced in chapter 7 with the white-robed multitude, that it was in heaven, not on earth. So that's how we should interpret it, or so they say. Conversely, those who argue for an earthly Zion point out that the two preceding visions of the beast, thing 1 and 2 of chapter 13, occurred on earth. Now, since there's no textual indicator for a change of venue, then Mount Zion in the current context should be rightly understood as on earth. One commentator provocatively argues that the specific location of Zion doesn't really matter because, scripturally speaking, mountains are already understood as liminal spaces. That is, they occupy space on both sides of the boundary between the earthly and the heavenly. And it goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden, which Ezekiel 28 suggests was on a mountain. And it was a place where heaven and earth met, as God walked with those he had created. Several chapters later in Genesis, on a mountain called Moriah, Abraham was to sacrifice the son of promise, and then was subsequently stopped from doing so. After which, we're told, so Abraham called the place the Lord will provide, and to this day it is said, on the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. Now, when we talk about having spiritual mountaintop experiences, there's a reason for that. Moses famously encountered God on a mountain called Horeb, later called Sinai, where he received the 10 Commandments and witnessed God's glory. Sometime later, the prophet Elijah witnessed God on the very same mountain. We could go on and on. In 2 Samuel 5, David takes and establishes Jerusalem, or for our purposes, Zion, as his capital. But it's God's intent to make Mount Zion his dwelling place that sets it apart. In more ways than one. Psalm 48, 1 and 2 says, "Great is the Lord, and most worthy of praise in the city of our God, his holy mountain. Beautiful in its loftiness, the joy of the whole earth. Like the heights of Zaphon is Mount Zion, the city of the great king." The irony is, Zion, the mountain of the Lord, is a hill. Elevation-wise, it's 2,510 feet. The Mount of Olives, less than half a mile away, clearly visible to all, is 185 feet taller. Mount Zion isn't even the tallest mountain in its zip code. The loftiness the psalmist sings of and the joy that it brings to the earth is not due its physical grandeur. Rather, its spiritual significance. Zion was where God chose to dwell. It's worth noting that wherever this Zion is that John sees, the center of that vision is not the temple, so many would expect, but the Lamb and his followers. We'll pick up there next time. Have a great week.